honestly,
Yeah.
Karl, I know we can joke, but can you believe an actual board of education in an actual state in the year of our Lord 2023 would do this just egregious nonsense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well,
Yes.
thank you for coming,
Sadly,
Karl.
yes.
We'll see you next
Have a
week.
good day.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Have a good day.
Thank you for coming to Karl's TED Talk.
What did we think was going to happen when we were told social studies and history curriculum can't make people uncomfortable?
Yeah.
What did we think was going to happen when people told us we needed to hear about both sides of slavery and both sides of the Civil War? What did we think was going to happen when we stopped talking about the experience of Black and African American people in this country, or ignoring all of the other social movements that have made this country great? As I've said from the very beginning, you can't understand the greatness of America without understanding what we've gone through to be where we are today.
And speaking of lack of education, Exhibit A, Marjorie Taylor Greene; Exhibit B, Peter Navarro. The people that throw around Civil War so casually, talk about, not learning from history. I mean, and imagine that now with automatic weapons. I mean, how many people died in the Civil War? Just the way people casually talk about it makes me think we haven't learned from history.
I mean, yes, and it's just silly. I mean, the idea that anyone would succeed in taking on the current federal military is just nonsense.
And by the way, speaking of Peter Navarro, he blames, of course, the left. Nobody on the left that I know credibly has called for a civil war. No. It is literally Congress people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or people in Trump's cabinet like Peter Navarro.
The other thing I would say is that if you're trying to get away from the idea that Republicans tried to have an insurrection on January 6th, talking about having a civil war is probably not the right way to do it.
Yeah. Give me 6. This is noted crank Peter Navarro. Here we go. Why is
in their quest for power, radical elements within the Democrat Party have abandoned any pretense of fairness, tolerance, and justice.
Yeah. Okay. And one more. Here we go.
Roughly half of Republicans and over a third of Democrats believe America is on the brink of civil war. If such an unthinkable war breaks out, it will be the Democrats' fault.
I mean, today could be indictment day again. I don't know, what your thoughts are on Trump's continued incitements of violence. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's worked on his first 2 indictments, but,
No, something tells me that that's not the best legal strategy, and perhaps that's why, you are more likely to find his current crop of lawyers on the back of the yellow pages than, in any kind of respected, grouping. There's a reason why he can't hold on to lawyers and why he's not attracting top talent to defend him, because he's doing the indefensible and he's making it more and more difficult for people to defend him.
Yeah. Well, and as we keep saying, it seems on the right, it's just a game of out-trolling each other. So then, the latest thing is Greg Gutfeld talking about Ron DeSantis's despicable remarks about slavery doubles down on the Holocaust, right? And so a Holocaust survivor obviously condemned Greg Gutfeld yesterday, called on the network to apologize after Gutfeld made controversial remarks about survival in concentration camps. This is a debate about Florida's slavery curriculum, which talks about slaves developed skills which they could use later for their personal benefit. Gutfeld compared the situation to Jews who, quote, had to survive in a concentration camp by having skills. You had to be useful. Utility kept you alive. This is Michael Bornstein, real quick, his reaction. And then we'll get yours, Karl.
Well, I'm disgusted, basically. My father was an accountant, and he had basically negotiating skills. He and my brother were gassed in Auschwitz. My mother learned how to pack bullets that killed Jewish people. There were over 6 million people killed in the Holocaust, over 1 million people killed in Auschwitz. And there's no silver lining to killing 6 million people or talking about slaves and the benefits of slaves and learning in what they were doing.
Karl, obviously in Germany, they take this seriously. They teach the Holocaust, obviously. What is it about us? I mean, I still some days cannot believe we're in the year 2023 when, America seems to not want to teach anything about our sins.
It's interesting. Evan and I went to Germany for the first time ever a couple of years ago, before the pandemic. And my dad has a German last name. I have a very German name, and I'd never been. And in the town square, there was a drunk guy yelling things in German, waving a Confederate flag.
Wow.
And I asked somebody who spoke English, because I am not bilingual, I said, why is he waving around a Confederate flag? And he said, here, it's illegal for us to use Nazi symbols.
Yeah.
So racists and bigots use the Confederate flag.
Wow.
And that said so much about the world we live in today.
Same here. And by the way, why at a lot of these right-wing rallies you see Confederate flags and Nazi flags? Yep. Because it's, same here.
Well, yeah. And, heritage.
Yeah.
I often think that people just, if they'd actually spent the time to learn properly when they were in school, we wouldn't be having many of these arguments or conversations.
Yeah.
The idea that anybody would even claim that a slave had some kind of a fair trade, with the people who robbed them of their families, their children, who beat them, who denied them of simple dignity, humanity, freedom, but at least they picked up a trade. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention how many people have said, many people were killed the second they got off the train.
Yep.
Millions of people. Most people. It's just such a deeply despicable thing to say. It's hard to.
But what it's a minimizing
Yeah.
of atrocities, and
Yeah.
people who do that are trying to make it less, less abhorrent in the eyes of the people who are hearing it, and that is remarkably disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah, when I went to Germany in college. I mean, I went to Dachau. I mean, why do you think they still have Dachau standing? So they will never forget. And you will never forget if you've been to any of those museums. And so that. But again, it's so interesting with you on the school board. It's like that's where that famous phrase came from. We're doomed to repeat it. If we don't learn history, we're doomed to repeat it. Right.
Right, and attacks on AP African American history and African American studies in our schools. I mean, all of this stuff stems from the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and all of us gay people here remember the pink triangles, and the gays and gypsies were the first people Hitler started to kill. And now you look at a lot of this anti-gay and trans legislation here in the United States. We were talking about Sinead O'Connor's tragic passing, and she was right about child rape in the Catholic Church. And meanwhile, you've got all the right wing calling gays the groomers, right?
Well, and a lot of LGBTQ people who were in the camps during the Holocaust were not freed when everybody else was. Right. And so there's a lot that we need to learn when we're in school, and that's the place to do it.
Yeah,
that's the place to do it. That's what school is for.
Yeah, yeah. So, Karl, I'm happy. Maybe Indictment Day. Then on to happier news for a moment.
Are we thinking Georgia today? I mean, I think that's what
we're thinking J6.
Listen, as a longtime political strategist, I just cannot, in the electorate at large, I just cannot imagine this is going to be a good thing. The more indictments, the better, yada, yada. I mean, what would you say his base is? Because whatever someone was saying, like that 30%, but you have to remember how few people, even as compared to Democrats, identify as Republicans, and then what that base is. It's obviously not the larger electorate.
Well, I think at this point it's been proven that the Republican electorate will go along with Trump. At least enough of them will to give him the nomination, regardless of any of the stuff, right? He has effectively convinced them that this is all political garbage, which is fascinating when you see interviews with people at his rallies where none of them actually know what the evidence is.
Yeah. And
when they're confronted with the evidence, they kind of, become silent. It's interesting to me that we're still having this conversation so many years after he said he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and he be fine politically, because that's exactly what
presumably rape them first, also. Yeah, if we're keeping
and
track
the
of
Republican
crimes.
Party has shown that they will accept absolutely anything from him.
Yeah, exactly. That we literally
and that won't change, by the way, until every Republican candidate who wants to be president understands they can't beat Donald Trump without beating Donald Trump.
Right.
Like, you can't defeat him without articulating a rationale for why you should replace him. And that means confronting why he's bad for their party. And very few people are willing to do that.
I feel like a party is lost that you have to explain to them why I don't know how many times indicted, impeached criminal rapist is not the best idea for a presidential candidate. I mean, if you have to tell them, okay. Anyway, Karl, you remain just a scamp and a delight.
Well, thank you very
Perennially.
much. Happy summer.
Happy summer.
You too. All right. See you
Stay
next
cool.
Bye.
Yeah. All right. 47 minutes after the hour. This portion of the show. Good morning, Malcolm Nance.
Good morning, Steffi.
Malcolm Nance, as seen on CNN this morning.
That's right.
10 out of 10, room rater. Malcolm, I mentioned this story already earlier, but this is why I'm wearing my Ukraine T-shirt for you, for democracy. This story has your name written all. I don't know if you saw this. So RFK